Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another online lecture in compute architecture. In this course, we have been looking at various concepts that make up a computing environment, the hardware platforms and so on. And in that series, in previous week, we looked at instruction set architectures. And in that, we identified that instruction set architectures are basically the way that a CPU or the way that we can instruct a CPU to use a particular part of its circuitry, a particular part of its logic or arithmetic circuitry to do a particular task. So instructions architectures are instruction set architectures are various ways through which we will be able to instruct the CPU to do certain things. In that, we also identified that instruction set architectures are going to be the very base level commands that the CPU can understand, so that they are going to be in binary code. So they are going to be various binary code instructions that the CPU can interpret and do various electronic operations. But as human users, as users who will be able to program these computers, programming them in binary code is not something very user friendly. It's not something that is memorable. We will not be able to efficiently use that to do our programming. So for that reason, we will have what is called assembly languages. And assembly languages are more about human friendly versions of these machine code or machine language. So when we think about programming languages, among the various programming languages that are there, we can see that we can differentiate them between high level and low level languages. When we say high level programming languages, these are the programming languages that you would be familiar with in terms of using to program or writing software. So these are languages like C, C++, Java, Visual Basic, Basic, and so on. These are more high-level programming languages that you would be normally using when you say you are programming. But they are also machine independent. So that is, say if you write a program in C language, you will be able to compile that in different computers, even if they have different underlying hardware architectures, even if they have different underlying processors, CPUs, we would still be able to use the same program and compile it in different hardware platforms and run it in those. So they are machine independent. On the other hand, what we have is machine dependent languages. These are the languages that are related to the machine code, so the assembly languages. Because they are related to the very specific machine code for a particular machine, they will be dependent on the machine. They will depend on the architecture of the machine, the architecture of the CPU, and depending on what is there in that particular CPU, this machine language code or the assembly language code will also differ. We will be able to do certain different things in different machines. So then what we will need to do is, even when we are programming in high level languages, what we do is we compile them using these machine specific assembly languages, or like compiling through these machine codes, and we will compile them to a machine dependent version of the program. So we will start from a machine independent high level program, high level language program, and then compile it down to a particular machine specific program that can be run on that particular computer, particular CPU architecture. Then when we have these assembly languages that are programmed in assemblers, so these are the ones that are correlating to the machine code of a particular system. So here what we have is, we have the internal language that is specific to that particular CPU, and we have a human readable representation in assembly language, and whatever that we do will have to be compiled, will have to be translated into those instructions that can actually be interpreted by the CPU as instructions. So even if we write in assembly languages, it will still need to be compiled into microcode that can be actually interpreted by the CPU, which will be in the form of binary code. So that is what we will have to do. Even if we do programming in high-level languages, or even if we do programming in assembly languages, they still need to be compiled or assembled to a version that is readily readable or readily interpretable by the particular CPU of the system. So in the context of high-level languages, what we have is compilers. So compilers are the ones that are going to translate these code that are written in high-level languages, and they will translate this into the machine-readable microcode, so that to the machine language. So that is the role of compilers. So each line of code that we may write in a high-level language may actually be translated into the number of lines in a machine language instruction. So, and in many ways, compilers will do a lot of changes depending on the CPU architecture, depending on how that needs to be presented to the CPU, how that needs to be presented through various memory modules and so on. Depending on those architectures, that specific architecture, a compiler would compile a high-level language program into a machine language code. So that has to be compiled to every different computer, that is to say every different CPU architecture or every different instruction set architecture. We will have to compile them separately. That's why, say for example, when you go to download a program, you will be presented, if you want to download it for a x86 64-bit system or a x86 32-bit system, or even a ARM Cortex processor system. So these are, because the underlying architecture of the hardware is different, it has to be compiled separately and differently. So here what we can see is, we have a program that is written in a sort of a high-level language, could be C++ or Java or something like that. So you have a method that is written in one of these languages. Then what we have is, when each of these are compiled or compiled into an assembly language, or like which is equivalent to what the machine language code could be, because like looking at, say for example, if we are to look at the machine language code here, we will not be able to see anything meaningful. So here we will see how it would be assembled, how it could be represented in an assembly code, and the similar thing would be there in machine code as well. So here you can see a few number of codes that is written in the high-level programming language will eventually become many number of codes in a assembly language version or the machine language version. It needs to become a number of, or rather a large number of lines of code that will be there. So that is how the relationship between a high-level language program and a machine language code will correlate. And when we are compiling a program using a compiler, what we will do is, we will compile it to a very specific architecture. Whatever the language that we are writing, C++ or Java or Pascal or whatever, whenever that is compiled into the compiled state, it will be compiled to that very specific architecture. But what it will give as a result is, even when it is run on a 32-bit architecture or a 64-bit architecture, it will still produce the same outputs. Even though the machine code is going to be different, it is going to do the same thing. So that is the expectation that we will have. Even when they are compiled or assembled in different architectures, the end program is supposed to do the same thing. So that is the expectation that we will have. And using assembly languages, what we would do is these machine code or microcode in a more human readable manner. And even if you want to write machine code directly, rather than writing high level and compiling, you will be able to do them in assembly language in a much more human friendly manner. And from a practical perspective, one of the things that we can do is, even when we are programming in sort of high level programming environments, like say in C++ using Microsoft Visual Studio or something, even in such programs, we will be able to do what is called include an assembly language code component, or a part of the assembly code can be included among the program that we may write in C or C++. So here what we can do is, we can use this code block. So we start with this, and anything that we put inside these brackets can be assembler code. So direct assembly language code, we can put it there and have it as part of any sort of C, C++ program. And this is one of the easiest way that you can also have some practice in running assembly language code. Now, from the perspective of the assembler, the one that is compiling the assembly programs or assembling the assembly programs into machine code, it needs to have a view of the processor, because it needs to have the view of the processor for us to do the programming accordingly. So what we need to know there is information such as registers. So we need to know what are the registers that we can use in that particular architecture for our programming, because everything that any data that is being used will move through registers. So any data that we need to bring in for processing has to come through registers. So we will have to bring in 2 different registers and then take them out accordingly when we need it. Then we also need to know what are the different status registers that we will have to update. So these are the things that will automatically update it, or we need to update them according to what we are doing. So these are the things also we need to know to that particular specific architecture. So if you have a particular CPU, you need to know what are the standard registers that you can use for data purposes, and what are the other status registers that you can use. And then you also need to know how you can deal with data in memory. So because instructions and data are going to come from memory. So whatever the program that we are running is going to be stored in the memory, and then that needs to be brought into the CPU and temporarily stored in the registers and then processed, and the results being sent back. So for us to do that, we also need to know how those interactions can happen. Just to sort of recap from when we were looking at memory architecture, we identified registers as these high-speed temporary storage locations within a processor. So inside a processor, we will have a number of memory locations that we can use for temporarily storing information while we are processing, and they will be much faster memory locations than if we were to access the external memory location. So that is something that we will do as well. And whatever the assembly language programming that we do, in that we will be able to directly manipulate those register locations. So we will be able to read from those memory locations, we will be able to write to those memory locations, and we will be able to manipulate them to do our data processing. And one of the things that we need to know is, to do that, how many registers are there, because from architecture to architecture, different processors will have different number of registers. So that is not a standard thing across all processors. With different architectures and different family of processors, the number of registers can change, and depending on the total number of registers that we can use, we will have to do our programming in a certain manner. If we don't have large number of registers, we may have to reuse these registers for, say, for example, instructions, or the data will come from the same register, and we have to put the results back in the same register. So such operations will depend on how many registers that we have. So for example, in a Pentium processor, we may have, say, 8. Instead of IBM mainframe, they have 16, and so on. And in some architectures, all the registers will be categorized similarly. So any register that is there can be used for all the purposes. So they are not specialized. So you can store in any register the memory value, any register data values, or any other purposes. Whereas in some other architectures, the registers will have specialized functions. So there will be a set of registers only which can be used to store data, and the others will have other specific sort of operational functions, but not about storing data. So again, we need to know that specifics of that architecture in terms of which registers we can use and which we cannot use, to decide what we can and cannot do. So when we think about the instructions that we can use, one of the things that we will identify is all of the information, all of the data is going to move to registers. So what we will have is, we will be able to say we have a number of registers, and we will be able to move data from one register to the other. So it can move from register to register. Then if we have the memory there, we can also, for example, load information from register memory to register. There are some instructions that may do memory to memory transfer, but they are rare in occurrence. And registers will not always hold the data itself. Sometimes they may hold a pointer to the data in the form of a memory address. So in this particular register, it may not have the actual data itself, but it may have a pointer saying the data is available in this particular memory location. So that is also a possibility. So when instructions are accessing a particular data point, they may come to that particular register. So they may come to the particular register, and if they find that is a reference to an address, they can go and read that particular data or load that data to a different register. So registers will be a key part in terms of moving data across when we are doing our processing in a CPU. And then when we think about different registers that are there in different architectures, one of the things that we can see is registers can have different names, because like it will not be, we will not normally identify them as a register 1, 2 and so on. We will have some form of a name to give to these registers, and we will refer them by those register names when we are programming them in assembly language programming. So that is how we will use the register names, and these register names can be sometimes similar across different architectures or families of processors. sometimes they may change, the names may change over the years or over the generations of different processors. Say for example, when there were say 16-bit registers in the earlier Intel processors, they used the names like AX and BX. But then when the 32-bit registers came about in later processors, the names also changed to be EAX and EBX, like extended registers, so to speak. And the thing to remember is, sometimes because of the need to having backwards compatibility and so on, the newer processors may also still support the older versions of names. So for example, in a case, the lower 16 bits of an EAX register can be considered as an AX register. So that type of arrangements can also be there, depending on how those can be. But the names of the registers will also be important for us to know what are these registers and how we can use them when we are doing this assembler programming. So in this diagram, what we can see is we have, say, some Intel register pattern. So for example, here we have AX, and AX is the 16-bit variant, EAX is the 32-bit variant, and RAX is the 64-bit variant. And even within the 16-bit variant, we have AL, which is the A low and A high, which is the low and high of the 16-bit register values. So depending on the variant of the processor and depending on the purpose, these may have different uses. So for example, in this case, these registers are identified as general purpose registers, whereas these registers have some particular functionality. So they can only be used for those specified functions, whereas the general purpose registers may be used for operations or data operations that we may have. So the nature of these registers and whether they are specialized or not specialized will largely depend on that particular architecture. In some architectures, all of the registers will have, as we discussed, will have the same functionality. So you can use them for any purpose. And some, say for example, like in Intel architectures, registers have particular functionality and we will use them for particular type of data sometimes, or particular type of operation. We may use particular registers. So we can have different functionalities associated with different registers within architectures, within different architectures. That is also possible. Once we have the understanding of these base architectures, registers and so on, then the next thing that we can do is we can actually do certain operations using the assembler programming. And one of the basic operations that we will do in assembler programming is loading and storing. What do we mean by loading and storing? It is about reading some values or writing some values. And we will use the same command for both of these, that is the move command. So we will use the move command, and depending on how we give the direction, we can make it a load or write. Say for example, if we have two locations, say let's say A and B, and in move command, depending on where if we give A B or we give B A, we can use the same command to move data from here to here or here to there. So we will use the same move command for loading and storing, that is reading and writing. So that is the move command, and that is one of the basic commands that we will use in assembly programming, because we will always have to move data across when we are doing the program. So the basic syntax of the move instruction is the command, then we have the destination and the source. So if we want to move a value from A to B, then the move command would be the destination is B, the source is A, so the value will be moved across. Here the destination and source, both of them can be either registers, either memory values, or both. So we can move from register to memory, or memory to register, or register to register. So that is how we would use the move command. Say if we look at these examples now, here this is how we may write an assembly program within say Visual Studio or something, because we are using the ASM construct. So inside that we are specifying the assembly programming, and in addition to that we are defining certain variables here that will be used within the assembly program. So we are defining certain values to cat, dog, bird, worm, cow, goat, and so on. Then each of these instructions we will do a number of things. Say for example, if we want to do cat dog value is equal to cat, what we have to do is, first we have to load the value of the cat into EAX, and then we have to load the value of EAX into dog. So by that we can move the value of cat to dog. Then say for example, if we want to do worm is equal to bird, worm is equal to bird, again the movement is in this direction. So we will move bird to CAX and then CAX to worm. The reason why we are using these different registers, so because you can see between these two we chose to use different registers. Here we use EAX, here we use CX. The reason for that is cat and dog are integer values and they may need a particular length to store, whereas bird and worm are short values, they may need a smaller register value is enough. Similarly, cow and goat, again we can do move using different register values there. So that is how a basic move operation will be done in assembler. Then when we are doing this programming, as we saw in the previous example, depending on the type of the data, we may be able to do different type of registers and so on. And when it comes to the type of data, there are two categories. One is hardware data types and the other one is software data types. So when we have hardware data types, they are long, integers and short. So these are long integers, and short integers. So these are integer values. Then we have float and double and character or byte. So these are the basic hardware data types that we have. Then with integers, what we have is integers can be signed or unsigned. So that is, they can be a signed integer value, whether to say it is a negative or positive value. Unsigned integer doesn't have that. Then all other data types that you will be familiar with when you are programming in sort of high level programming languages, things like Boolean values, objects, strings, and all these things, arrays and so on, all of those are going to be software data types. So they are not going to be directly supported by the hardware. They have to somehow translate it into one of the data types that can be supported by the hardware. So that is how different data types will be used in different programming languages. And when it comes to sort of assembly or sort of low-level programming, we will rely on hardware data types. Then, when we think about different operations that we can do, the operations that can be performed using assembler programming will correlate to the operations that are supported by the instruction set architecture of that particular CPU. So they will correlate to all the arithmetic and logical instructions as well. So if a particular CPU has an ALU that supports certain arithmetic and logical instructions, those can be represented or those can be instructed through the assembler programming as well. So these could be standard operations that are common, would be additions, subtractions, multiplications, signed multiplication. So unsigned multiplication is when we are multiplying two unsigned numbers. So there's no negative, positive is not considered there. Signed multiplication is about negative and positives are considered. Then similarly, division has unsigned division and signed division. Then in terms of logical operations, we can also do and or that type of logical operations as well. So these are various arithmetic and logical operations that can be supported by a particular architecture, and then that can be used to assemble a program. So in this example, we can see a very basic assembler instruction, an arithmetic instruction using assembler. So the instruction that we are trying to do here is this one. Bird is equal to cat plus dog. So what we can do is, we can first do a move operation. We do a move operation first to move the value of dog into EAX. Then we can use the add instruction, and the syntax for the add instruction is add destination and the source, similar to move, but here we will have the value that we want to add. So when we do add, it will take the values from these two locations and then store the results back in the first one. So that's how the syntax of add is. So here what we do is first load dog into EAX, then add cat to the value in EAX, and then store the value in EAX back to bird. So that is how we would use these arithmetic instructions in assembler. In the next example, again, similarly, what we are doing is we are first loading dog into EAX, then we are doing an addition with cat, then a subtraction with bird, then moving that into cow. So again, this is another arithmetic instructions where we are using, in addition to the actual arithmetic operations, in addition to the arithmetic operations of addition and subtraction, we are also using the move command significantly to move values across different storage locations. Maybe this is an example that you can think about yourself. Take this example, do it yourself, and say what would be the result. If in dog is 4, cat is 3, and bird is 5, after these operations are performed, what is the value? What is the resulting value of EAX? So what is the resulting value that we have in EAX? So do that as an activity on your own and say what is the result. one of the other types of operation that we can do is, instead of using the arithmetic operations and utilizing registers, what we can do is we can do certain operations directly on the registers themselves without moving across different places. So it can be done on registers or even memory locations. Operations like incrementing and decrementing, these are sort of very common in various sort of programming constructs. So even if you want to increment, say if you want to increment by a value, increment by 1, if you want to do that, we may have to say move to a register, then we have to do an add to that, then we have to move the value back. Instead of doing it in those multiple steps, we can use some additional sort of specialized instructions like incrementing and decrementing, and we can increment or decrement whatever the value that is in the register or the memory location. That is also another way of using these sort of arithmetic operations, very specific to incrementing and decrementing values. Sometimes we may have to do operations with operands that are larger than the size of a register. So say if our register is a 32-bit register, but we have a value to do store and operate that is 64 bits. So now what we will do is we will take two registers, divide them into two halves, and we will store the least significant bit in one part and the most significant bit in the other part, and we will use them as a combination like this. So here we will, whenever in instructions we will say these two together as a destination or a source, and both of them can be read as a 64-bit data value. Even though our storage is only enough to store 32 bits, we combine them. So this can be used when our operands or the instruction operands that we have are larger than our storage location or registers. Then when we look at multiplication instructions, so with multiplication instructions we can use the multiplication. So the basic multiplication instruction is this, and we can use that in few different ways. So the first way we will use multiplication is we will use the instruction and we will give a value, a memory value. So what this will do is this will multiply whatever that is here by whatever that is stored in EAX. So what we are doing here is we are not explicitly saying what is stored in EAX, but we are multiplying it by that value. If you want to explicitly say the two locations, what we will do is we will specify them one after the other. So here this and this will be multiplied. And the third way that we can do is we can say specify a value for like a memory location, and then we can also specify an additional constant. That is where we would store the result. So rather we will multiply the memory location with constant and store the result in register. Similarly, here also we will store the result in register. So that is how we would use the multiplication instruction. The division instruction is again one of the things that can again happen with division instructions as well. We can, if we want to specify large operands, we can do that as well. And the standard way of using the division instruction is about when we take the division instruction, what we would have is we would use say if it is a 32-bit value that we are working with, we will take a combination of a 64-bit number, so that a combination of an EDX and EAX. And here what we would do is, so when we normally do a division, we would have a resulting quotient and then a remainder. So the resulting quotient will be stored in EAX and the remainder will be stored in EDX. So that is how we would normally use the division instruction. Say for example, here we can see some again arithmetic examples using multiplications and divisions. So here we want to multiply dog by cat. So first we load dog into EAX. Then when we multiply cat, it multiplies whatever the value that is in EAX. Then when we divide by bird, it divides whatever the value that is stored in EAX. So here again, in each of these, the result is again stored back in EAX. So finally, we can move whatever the value that is in EAX back to the desired location. Similarly, say for example here, what we are doing is a modulus division. So here, at this point, we are clearing EDX because EDX is where we have the remainder, and then we are doing it accordingly. So that is how we may be able to use multiplication and division instruction. Then the other category of instructions that we may be able to use in our assembly language programming is what is called shift instruction. So what shift instructions can do is they can shift the values in a register or memory location. So what they can do is they can shift the value to right or to left by the specified bit of numbers. So for example, if we do it by value 5, so it will move by 5 bits. If we do, say for example, we can also shift them by a constant using that is stored in a CL register. So we can give the value itself, or we can specify that in a CL register. So a shift example could be we start with integer is set as 3. So when we move that to EAX, EAX becomes 3. Then we shift that by 2, then that becomes 12. Then we shift that by 1, then that becomes, here we do left, and here we shift right. So when we shift left, then that shift the bits by 2 bits to the left, so the value changes to 12. Then when we shift right, the value changes back to 6. So what we looked so far is certain basics of assembly programming, and this is given as sort of an introduction for you to start learning about assembly programming. I have included certain links here for you all to look into, further learn about assembly programming, and there are some online compilers or online assemblers that you can use to learn much easily as well without the need to installing any programs or so on. And we may have certain in-class or in lab activities when time permits for you all to practice these as well. But in the meantime, I would urge you all to go to these resources and refer back. And as always, if you have any particular questions about this particular module, please let me know, and we can have a revision or a discussion session to discuss any further doubts that you may have on this. And as I said, we may try to organize a suitable time to do some practicals along with you in assembly programming. So we can have much in-depth sort of programming, so we can try out much more detailed examples in those sessions than covering them in this lecture. So we covered the basics of what you need to know in terms of assembly programming now, and more detailed examples can be covered at a later stage. So with that, we come to the end of the lesson today, and in the coming weeks we will be looking at sort of multi-core processors and a few other topics related to computer architecture. But with that, that concludes the lecture today, and as always, if you have any questions or doubt, please let me know, and if there's anything other that I can help, please let me know as well. Until next time, thank you.